Hello and welcome to Morris Park. I'm Clyde Morris. And as you can see here in the park, fall has come. Now you can see out of my palette out there, all my cactus are gone off of it. I brought in most of everything. Trying to get ready for the winter here and trying to do things a little early. Got a lot of things going on, so we're trying to get things done quick, so we won't have to be doing it all this next month. Anyhow, today's video is at the request of one of my viewers, Mr. Terry Gent, and he was wanting to have me do a video on Caudiciform Euphorbias, and one of his questions was how to make the codex bigger. Well, first of all, as you see in this is one of my Caudiciform Euphorbias, and this is actually a special one. This is Euphorbia Enigma, and this is a stellata Evansii hybrid. You can see the codex there. Now, Caudiciform Euphorbias, the reason they form a codex is because of the environments that they're in. In the Cape Province of South Africa, they can store water in these codexes during these very dry periods that happen there. In that environment, things sometimes get so dry that they will actually shed all the branches. Now, this particular Euphorbia, of course, is not from the Cape of South Africa, because it was actually grown here in this greenhouse and actually produced in this greenhouse. This was actually a gift from the pollinators, you might say, as it crossed my Evansii with a stellata that I had. Actually, it was only a little branch of a stellata, but it had flowers on it and produced seed, and this was the only one that came up, and I actually found it accidentally growing in another pot with some of my cactus. Now, as far as making a codex bigger on some of these Caudiciform Euphorbias, well, in my best experience, really it's time. I've read where you can cut a lot of the branches off and such, and it will actually send more power going back into the codex and make it fatten up. I personally don't want to chop all my branches off my Euphorbia just to try to get the larger codex. In time, it really grows by itself. Now, this one was sprouted, basically. I found it in 2005 when it was a tiny seedling in one of my cactus, growing there as a volunteer, because as we know, Euphorbia plants usually shoot their seeds across the greenhouse or wherever they're at and propel them into other places to take advantage of other spots to grow. Now, most of these Caudiciform Euphorbias like this, especially these Medusoid types, are from South Africa. They're really rich in these types of plants, and the reason they do this is because of the environment, so they can store that water. Times get tough, they just shed the branches, and the codex stays down on the ground, and then when times are better, it'll regrow its branches again. The only time this one's ever lost its branches, and I had a rat come in here when it was a young plant and strip every branch off the codex. Now, did this help it get a bigger codex? I'm not really sure. But for these types, in propagating them, and most all these types that come from a center head like this, much like Medusoids do, and the Caput Medusae group, which I'll show you here in a minute. When they're started from these branch cuttings, if you just start a branch cutting, all you're going to get is a longer and longer branch cutting. That's all you're going to get. It'll root. It won't produce the codex, and it'll just be longer and longer, unless you do a two-step cutting method. And this is true for a lot of Euphorbias that grow from a main stem, including a lot of Euphorbia trees, such as my Euphorbia Evansii here. And as you see, it's a pretty stately tree down there. But if you look, they grow from these main stems. And see this whorl of branches coming out from this main stem? Now, the branches are 3-angled. The main stem can be 4, 5, or 6-angled. Now, when I first got this plant, it was a branch cutting. I got it from California Cactus Center, and I didn't really know that you had to recut these. So the branch got longer and longer and longer, and all it was just a big long branch like this snaking across my shelves and never turning into much more than one of these branches. But if you do this, if you recut these cuttings as I've done with these Evansii branch cuttings, what you get is it grows into the tree. It'll produce these main stems and start growing into the normal tree. And the little 3-angle branches that you see around it, and then you see that main stem there. I think it's about a 4-angled branch right now. And that'll continue to multiply probably into a 6 or 8-angled branch. Both these have been done this way. You see the cut there. Cut it a couple inches from the top. And they'll grow out. And these are going to be double trunk trees. Now my original Evansii did start out like that. It was a double trunk tree, but one side did die. I don't really know why, but it died. And the other side came back marvelously and grew well. But all these types of caudiciforms have to grow from this main stem or produce main stems. Here's another one that produces actually multiple heads. And as you see from the codex, there's a head, and the main head's right in the middle here. There's the main head. And I believe, yes, there's another head right coming out there at the bottom. Now, if I were to just plant this branch, it would just get longer and longer, and it wouldn't do much else than get longer. If I cut it, then it would turn into a normal plant. Or on this type that produces multiple heads like this, you could actually remove one of these main stem heads from the main codex there, dry it like you normally would a cutting, and it would grow. And you can see that little knob there with the branches growing out of it. That's one of the main stems. Let's see here, or like down in here. There you go. Those are the main stems that come out on it. And you can actually propagate these and get a normal plant also without having to do the 2-step cutting method. Anyhow, this is one of my other Caudiciform Euphorbias, and this is Euphorbia persistens. And if you look under there, I can't hardly get through the branches there because this is a low sweeping plant, you might say. But you can see that caudex there. Grows right out from that main stem there, from a central point. And this is the same way. If you want to propagate this one, you have to do this with the 2-step cutting method. I've seen lots of people try to propagate Groeni waldii and tortorama and show pictures of these propagations, but they're usually just a single branch. They're never recut. And so they just get taller and taller and longer and longer. And you never get the typical plant with the caudex. You can see the caudex back in there. This Euphorbia is also known as Euphorbia clavigera. And that's what I first knew it as many years ago. But I bought this one a couple years ago at Drummond's Cactus and Succulent Nursery out there in DeSoto, Missouri. And it was marked as persistence. I looked this up in the Euphorbia Journal, and a long time ago this name was put over to Euphorbia persistens. And of course, you know the name game. Things are constantly changing and so forth. But yeah, this is a beautiful one. I really love this Caudiciform Euphorbia. Very cool. I like these. These are what they call the dwarf paired spine Euphorbias, what they describe these as. And I really like them. It's a beautiful plant, Euphorbia persistens. Now this is another one. This is Euphorbia enormous. And with this plant, it also grows from main stems. Instead of just the central point, it'll produce side main stems. As you can see right there, that little ball there growing out all those branches. If you want a normal plant, easy, that would be the way to propagate this one. Cut that little knob off right at the caudex there. You can see. You can cut that off and dry that, and you'll get a normal plant that'll grow from that little knob, and it'll produce a caudex. Or you have to do the 2-step cutting method. Now you see I got this in a kind of a tall pot. That's because the roots on these things actually go pretty deep on some of them. And you kind of need a little bit of space on some. Now, on this one, the Euphorbia Groeni waldii, and you can't hardly see the caudex under it yet. See if I can peel that up a little bit. Ouch. But there it is. Let me see, get that lava rock out of the way. Be very careful I don't get blood all over. But there it is. There's the caudex on that. And as I say, I see lots of these propagated as a single branch. But just picture that standing on end, and that's pretty much what the plant will keep doing. It'll just get longer and longer. And that's all you'll get. But you'll just cut the end off of this plant as it grows. You want to make sure they're rooted. When your cutting is well rooted and it's growing, I usually like to go ahead and feed them a little bit right before I do it, and then cut the top off, like a couple inches above the ground level. And then what you'll get is a plant that'll start producing later on. This takes some time now. It's not instant. A plant that'll produce a small head, hopefully, on the side as an offshoot, and that can be removed later on, and then you'll have your normal plant like this, instead of just a branch. Now, other euphorbias that have caudexes, and before I show you them, would be the Caput Medusae group. And before I show you that, I'm going to show you another little hybrid that this one is a father of. And it was crossed also with a stellata. And I got this. There's a Groenewaldii stellata cross. I don't have a name for it quite yet. But right there you can see a little caudex forming. And with seed, you can always get a caudex out of one of these plants. It will always produce a caudex. So seed is the very surest way to get yourself a Caudiciform Euphorbia. Or you're going to have to do the two-step. Or grow from a side main stem. There you are. See that? Now this has been growing for about a year now. It's been very slow. And you can even see the slight twist that's in the branch, and that's from the Groenewaldii father. It'd be very interesting to see how this plant changes as it grows, because this one has changed a lot in the time it's grown. And just from a distance, you look at it, it looks like a stellata, but if you look closely at this plant, most of the branches are three-angled. And not only that, even four-angled. Look at that. And that comes from the Evansii father. It took me a while to figure out the father on this one, but finally did. Turned into a beautiful plant. Now you wouldn't think it, but these Caput Medusae type Euphorbias, these little Medusa heads, are actually a caudiciform plant. This thick, fat body they have will continue to grow and grow. And as it grows, you'll see it kind of bark up, and you'll see the caudex form. But that's actually considered a caudex back in there. And you see I'm kind of a lucky guy here. See those little sprouts? Those are hybrid Euphorbias. This is a hybrid Euphorbia itself. I got it from Botanic Wonders. It was only labeled as pot I, or 9. Anyway, I crossed it with my Euphorbia gorgonis, which is almost in constant bloom, and got a whole bunch of little, about 5 of them. I say a whole bunch, about 5 new little hybrid Euphorbias that are doing really wonderful. But the seed I collected from this one in the back cross never sprouted. I never had one of them sprout that I tried. But then I got a surprise, and it did it by itself. They sprouted real well all by themselves right in with the mother. Pretty cool. Here's some others. This is a Euphorbia murray. And on this Caput Medusae type, you can actually see the caudex really well. See that? Now it's kind of draped over and has this kind of curtain of branches here. But yeah, if you look under it, you can see the caudex well formed under there. And the same thing with these. A lot of these in nature, what they'll do, if it gets too dry, they'll pull all the way down on the ground, lose the branches, and they'll just wait until some rain comes, and then the branches will regrow. Also, what happens with these are easy to propagate because you can do these without a two-step. And all you got to do is wait for these heads to form. You just wait for these heads to form on the side, and a lot of these Caput Medusae types do. You can plant these off, and they start forming heads. And this one does it quite readily. It's got a lot of fat little tips here that are changing, and they'll become new plants, basically. Runners, if you will. And you can propagate the plant. You can see the little branches growing from them already. So yeah, these Caput Medusae type also produce a caudex. Now this is my Euphorbia gorgonis. And as you see, it freely blooms. It's in full bloom again. The seedlings I have in the house, which I don't have out here to show you, are from this one, crossed with that hybrid Medusoid I just showed you. In full bloom, looking really nice. Now you can't see the caudex on this because it's so covered in branches. This one's really thick with the branches, but if you look under there, you can kind of see it right there. That's the caudex. Same on this big Flanaganii. You can't really see the caudex. You see one of the offsets that are coming out. And that's what's interesting about these two. These Medusoid types can either produce them from branch heads that form, like this one here. See, it's a branch that's forming into a new plant. And they produce a little longer. You can see the branch itself, see? New head on it, and that can be propagated off by itself or left on the plant. This one is actually like an offset you would see just coming out of the side of the caudex. And it's tight with the plant, doesn't have the long stem on it like a branch head does, but produces heads in two ways. And these can both be propagated off of the plant. They just be taken off the plant, dried, and calloused for about a week or so, and then replanted and they'll be fine. And there's another one. Like I said, you can't really see the caudex on these because the branches are so thick. And there's another Murray. Now the mother is right in the middle, but these are the heads that are propagated. See that? The new heads are propagated on this plant. We're pretty much all over it. And it's just hard to see the caudex down in there, but it's like the first Murray I showed you. It had that long, tall caudex, and as this matures, it'll do the same with all these others. Really cool Caudiciform Euphorbias. Now I'm going to show you this one. And this is Euphorbia cylindrifolia, varieties. Really cool looking little plant. I got this from Mr. Alan Peck up there in Ecorse, Michigan. And these were cutting plants. Now, in this particular caudiciform, this should be rising from a turnip-looking root. It's like a ball almost. But if you start them from cuttings, and this one you can't get around, I found out, it will not produce the caudex. They'll grow, and you can see they're putting out new leaves and everything, and actually doing pretty good. But they will not produce that turnip-like caudex. It'll still be interesting to use, possibly in hybridizing maybe with my Decarii or something like that. But still, this is one of those euphorbias you're just not going to get the caudex unless you grow it from seed. So on this one, if you want the caudex, you're going to have to find somebody that has seed or produce seed yourself and get it. And the trick with this plant is it's not self-fertile, so you'll need another one to actually cross-pollinate with. Now this is another Caudiciform Euphorbia I have. And this is another one from Madagascar, just like the one I showed you. And this is Euphorbia francoisii. You can see it's in bloom. And these come in so many different shapes and colors, it's unreal. And I got this from Drummond's Cactus and Succulent Nursery. Now this plant, if I can get under here, I can show you the actual caudex. Let me see here. It's kind of hard to see this side. Turn this around. And right here. Right there. You can see the caudex on this is forming. It's not a super huge caudex yet, but the caudex is forming. And it'll put a really nice multi-rooted kind of fat caudex on it. And as they grow, here's the other thing. If you want your caudex to look bigger, is to lift it. I figured this is probably the best one to demonstrate with. You can see the caudex the best. Now as a seedling, this thing grew. I'll use this one too. Like that, and as it grew, I kept raising it. And as you raise it, you can see more of the caudex. Like this little bitty guy here. But as it grows, you can raise it, and you can see some of the smaller roots down in there. Now, if they're too high up on the caudex when you try to raise it, you can actually snip the finer roots from around the top of the plant and lift the caudex up, just as long as you don't damage too many of the roots below. You can treat these with some cinnamon. Keep out any bacterial infection. Wash them off when they bleed with some water first. Spray them off. And then after they dry, put some cinnamon powder on them. And raise the caudex up. And you can do this almost every time you transplant it. And that's basically kind of a secret on how to make the caudex bigger. It's not really making the caudex bigger, but you're seeing it more visibly when you keep raising it. And you can actually get a pretty nice sized caudex just by raising and lifting the plant so you can see more of it. It's not necessarily, like I said, not necessarily that you're blowing it up and making it get bigger. It just looks bigger because you see more of it. And it looks better as a display. It makes it look kind of like a little bonsai tree or something like that. Yeah, I really like my Caudiciform Euphorbias. Well, that's pretty much most of what I have here. My Caudiciform Euphorbias. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour. I'm sorry, really, Terry, that I couldn't actually give you a secret on how to make the caudex fatter and grow bigger. But hopefully just these little techniques will help out and help you get a bigger caudex on the euphorbias you're trying to grow. So anyhow, I'm Clyde Morris from Morris Park. Hope you enjoyed the video and seeing my Caudiciform Euphorbias. You all have a good evening and take care.